Belonging is a word that sits wrong in the mouth now, like biting down on something that used to be food but has turned to chalk. The taste is familiar, the nourishment is gone. There are so many places to be. That's the problem. Not too few doors, but too many. All of them slightly ajar. All of them promising something, none of them closing behind. A person can walk through 100 thresholds and still be standing in the corridor. The old loneliness was about being locked out. This one is stranger. This one comes from being let in everywhere, partially, provisionally, with the understanding that leaving is always an option. The door stays open because no one expects anyone to stay. Why would they? Why would anyone? Connection is buffet. Sample this community. Taste that one. Move along before the flavor settles into anything recognizable. There is a word for this kind of eating, but it is not nourishment. It is consumption without digestion, taking in without being changed. The body learns to expect nothing to last. I think about roots and what they require. They require staying. They require the foreclosure of elsewhere. A tree does not grow by keeping its options open. It commits to specific soil, specific light, specific limitation. It accepts that growing here means not growing there. The acceptance is not a loss. The acceptance is the condition of depth, but everything now is organized against that acceptance. The architecture of connection assumes impermanence. The platforms are built for flow, not settlement. Join easily, leave easily. Your presence is valued but not expected to be permanent. Nothing is expected to be permanent. Permanence itself has become suspicious, a failure of imagination, an unwillingness to adapt. So adaptation becomes the virtue. Flexibility, mobility, the capacity to belong quickly and release quickly, light attachments that travel well. The self is carry-on luggage. The exhaustion is not from any single community asking too much. It is from the distributed demand, the parallel processing of partial presences, the awareness that showing up here means failing to show up there. Every act of attention is also an act of neglect. Every commitment is also an abandonment. The math never works. There is not enough presence to go around. Guilt pulls in the gaps. The communities one has drifted from. The conversations that stop mid-sentence. The people who were important last year, last month, last week, who have become names in a contact list one scrolls past without stopping. Not forgotten exactly, just dispersed into the general haze of people once connected to, still technically reachable, practically unreachable in any way that matters. There is a thinning that happens. Care spread across too many surfaces loses its substance, like butter scraped over bread until the bread shows through. Something is being applied, but nothing is being received. The motion continues, but the meaning leaks out. What would it mean to choose? Really choose. Not add another partial membership, but subtract, foreclose, accept the limitation that choosing implies. This community and not that one. This place and not elsewhere. This life and not the 1,000 other lives still theoretically available. The terror is not choosing wrong. The terror is choosing it all. Because choosing means becoming someone specific. Someone who lives here rather than there, who knows these people rather than those who has traded possibility for actuality. The unbecoming of all the selves one might have been. People used to have this chosen for them. Geography chose. Family chose. Class chose. The foreclosure was externally imposed and therefore blameless. One could be fully present because presence was not selected from among options. It was simply what remained when the options were removed. There is no returning to that. The options exist. The alternatives are visible. The grass is observable in real time. Its relative greenness accessible through screens that never go dark. One can always check. One can always compare. One can always wonder. And wondering prevents settling. Home was never a place. Home was a quality of relationship to place, a depth of investment that made the question of elsewhere irrelevant. Not because elsewhere did not exist, but because it did not matter. The mattering was here. The attention was here. The roots were here because here was where life was happening. Now life happens everywhere and nowhere. Distributed across time zones, mediated through glass, available in notifications that arrive from communities one has not visited in days or weeks or months. The communities persist in one's absence. They do not require presence to continue. They will be there when one returns. If one returns, neither damaged nor improved by the absence. This is meant to be freedom. The freedom to participate without being trapped, to belong without being bound, to connect without being captured. Freedom to leave. Freedom to stay. Freedom to half stay. to ghost participate, to maintain the appearance of membership whilst being actually absent. But freedom from commitment is also freedom from depth. The two cannot be separated. Depth requires precisely what freedom resists: the narrowing of attention, the foreclosure of alternatives, the acceptance that being here means not being there. One or the other, not both, never both. The body knows this even when the mind refuses it. The body that cannot relax because it is always partially elsewhere. The body that carries the weight of distributed presence like bags never unpacked. The body that has forgotten what it feels like to be one place completely, without the hum of elsewhere running beneath the surface. There is a kind of rest that comes only from arrival, not the pause between movements, but the cessation of movement, the setting down of the question of where to be. The question answers itself when there is no elsewhere to consider. One is here because here is where one is. The tautology is not meaningless. The tautology is home. What remains when arrival is structurally prevented, when the conditions of contemporary life make here and nowhere else impossible, when every here carries the shadow of the elsewheres that remain accessible, that call through screens, that remind one that this is chosen and therefore unchosen able, maybe acceptance, not of home but of homelessness, the recognition that the condition is structural, not personal, that belonging fully is not available under these conditions, that the partial belonging one has is what belonging looks like now, that mourning the depth one cannot have is different from failing to achieve it. But acceptance is another word that sits wrong. It implies completion, settlement, the closing of a question that remains stubbornly open. One does not accept homelessness, one lives it. One wakes inside it each morning and carries it through the day and lies down in it at night. It is not a problem to be solved or a state to be accepted. It is the weather. The communities continue. The notifications arrive. The partial presences are maintained, or not maintained, or maintained for a while, and then allowed to lapse. The guilt pools and disperses and pools again. The tiredness accumulates. The question of where to be is asked and asked again, never settling, never quite arriving at an answer that stays answered. Somewhere in this there is a life. Not the life of deep belonging, not the life of roots grown thick in specific soil, but a life nonetheless, present across many surfaces, connected to many and close to few. Moving through communities like rooms, one is permitted to enter but not to furnish, inhabiting provisionally, leaving provisionally, staying provisionally. The provision is not temporary. That is the realization that lands heaviest. The provisional is the permanent now. The not quite belonging is the belonging. The distributed exhaustion is the cost of distributed connection. The homelessness is not a stage before home. The homelessness is. And still the doors remain open. And still one walks through. And still the question asks itself, over and over, in the silence between obligations. Where's here? Where is the ground that holds? Where is the place one can stop arriving and simply be? The question echoes. The rooms are empty. The doors stay open. No one answers.